When desperate single mother Sophia accepts a shocking proposal from her billionaire boss, Julian Cross, she enters a world of luxury, lies, and forbidden passion. But this fake relationship arrangement becomes dangerously real until she discovers the devastating truth that changes everything. The rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of Julian Cross's corner office as Sophia Martinez stood before his mahogany desk, her resignation letter trembling in her hands. The scent of expensive cologne and leather filled the air, a stark contrast to the cheap coffee and fluorescent lighting she'd grown accustomed to in the lower floors. "You can't leave," Julian's voice cut through the storm outside, low and commanding. His steel-gray eyes bore into hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Not now." Sophia's jaw tightened. "My daughter needs surgery, Mr. Cross. The insurance won't cover it. And I can't afford to keep working for wages that barely cover rent, let alone medical bills." Julian rose from his chair, his 6-foot frame casting a shadow across the Persian rug. The man who had built Cross Technologies from nothing moved with predatory grace around the desk until he stood close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. "What if I told you there was another way?" His voice dropped to a whisper that sent shivers down her spine. "A way that could solve all your financial problems." The air between them crackled with unspoken possibilities. Sophia's heart pounded as she met his gaze, seeing something dark and hungry lurking beneath his composed exterior. "What kind of way?" she asked, though part of her already knew the answer would change everything. Julian's lips curved into a smile that was equal parts dangerous and seductive, the kind that requires absolute discretion, complete trust, and a willingness to play a role that goes far beyond the job description of executive assistant. Thunder crashed overhead as Sophia realized she was standing at the edge of a precipice, one step away from a world she'd never imagined entering. "I need you to be my companion," Julian continued, his fingers brushing against her wrist where her pulse raced wildly. "At social events, business functions, anywhere I need someone by my side who understands the stakes." "You mean your pretend girlfriend?" Sophia said, her voice barely audible over the storm. "I mean whatever we decide it needs to be." The weight of Victoria's medical bills pressed down on her shoulders like concrete. Her daughter's bright smile flashed in her mind, followed by the doctor's grave expression when he'd explained the urgency of the surgery. "How much?" The words escaped before she could stop them. Julian named a figure that made her knees weak. "Enough to save Victoria? Enough to change their lives completely." "There's a charity gala this Saturday," he said, pulling a black credit card from his wallet. "Consider it your audition." As Sophia's fingers closed around the card, she felt the last of her old life slip away like sand through her fingers. The exclusive boutique on 5th Avenue felt like stepping into another universe. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbow patterns across marble floors while classical music drifted through air perfumed with roses and money. Sophia's fingers tightened around the credit card as a perfectly manicured sales associate approached with the predatory smile of someone who recognized wealth. "I need a dress for a charity gala," Sophia said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Of course, darling. Right this way." The dresses were works of art, each one costing more than she'd earned in months. But when Sophia slipped into the midnight blue silk gown, something fundamental shifted inside her. The woman staring back from the three-way mirror was elegant, confident, untouchable. The dress transformed her from a struggling single mother into someone who belonged in Julian's world. "Stunning," the associate breathed, fastening diamond earrings that caught the light like trapped stars. "You look absolutely radiant." Saturday evening arrived wrapped in anticipation and terror. Victoria giggled from the couch as Mrs. Martinez fussed over Sophia's appearance, declaring her more beautiful than any princess. But when Julian's driver called from downstairs, reality crashed back down. The ballroom was a fairy tale brought to life. Thousands of dollars worth of flowers created a garden paradise, while an orchestra played beneath crystal chandeliers that threw rainbows across the crowd. Sophia had never seen such wealth concentrated in one place, had never imagined she would walk among people whose casual conversations involved millions of dollars. Julian's hand rested on the small of her back as he introduced her to a parade of influential strangers. She found herself adapting, reading social cues with instincts she didn't know she possessed. Every smile, every laugh, every casual touch felt choreographed in a dance she was learning as she performed it. "So tell me," Mrs. Harrison, the judge's wife, leaned closer with predatory curiosity, "how exactly did you and Julian meet?" "Through work," Sophia replied smoothly, the lie rolling off her tongue with surprising ease. "He has a way of making the ordinary feel extraordinary." Julian's grip on her back tightened slightly. Whether from appreciation or warning, she couldn't tell. Then she saw her. Rebecca Stone moved through the crowd like a queen surveying her kingdom. Everything about her screamed expensive perfection. From her cascade of golden hair to the designer gown that probably cost more than Sophia's car, but it was the way she looked at Julian that made Sophia's chest tighten with an emotion she refused to name. "Julian, darling?" Rebecca purred, air-kissing his cheeks with practiced intimacy. Her emerald eyes swept over Sophia with the thoroughness of a jeweler examining a potentially fake diamond. "And who is this lovely creature?" "Rebecca, meet Sophia." Julian's voice carried a note of tension. "Sophia, this is Rebecca Stone." Rebecca's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. "How wonderful that Julian is dating again. Tell me, Sophia, how long has this been going on? You two seem so comfortable together." The question hung in the perfumed air like a challenge. Sophia felt every eye in their small circle focus on her, waiting for her response. In that moment, she realized this wasn't just about money anymore. "Long enough to know that some things are worth waiting for," Sophia replied, her hand finding Julian's arm with possessive certainty. Rebecca's smile faltered for just a moment, but it was enough. Julian's eyes met Sophia's with something that looked dangerously close to genuine admiration. The game had begun, and Sophia was no longer sure who was playing whom. 3 weeks into their arrangement, the lines between performance and reality had begun to blur in ways that terrified Sophia. Julian's penthouse apartment had become familiar territory, its floor-to-ceiling windows offering a view of the city that made her feel like she was living in the clouds. Tonight, they were preparing for another event. But something had shifted between them. "You're getting too good at this," Julian said, watching her adjust the diamond necklace he'd given her. His reflection appeared behind hers in the mirror, close enough that she could feel his breath on her neck. "Getting good at what?" Her voice came out breathier than intended. "At making people believe we're real?" The word hung between them, loaded with implications neither wanted to acknowledge. Their fingers brushed as he helped with the clasp, and the electric shock that ran through her had nothing to do with static. "Maybe that's because it's starting to feel real," Sophia whispered before she could stop herself. Julian's hands stilled on her shoulders. In the mirror, she watched his carefully controlled expression crack just slightly, revealing something vulnerable and hungry underneath. "That wasn't part of the deal," he said. But his hands didn't move away. A lot of things weren't part of the deal. The business dinner was torture. Sophia played her role perfectly, charming investors and laughing at their jokes while Julian's hand remained possessively on her waist. But beneath the table, his thumb traced circles on her hip that had nothing to do with their performance and everything to do with the tension that had been building for weeks. It was past midnight when they returned to his penthouse. The city sparkled below them as Sophia kicked off her heels, her resolve crumbling with each step toward the door. "Stay." Julian's voice stopped her. "Victoria's with Mrs. Martinez until tomorrow. Stay tonight." Every rational thought screamed at her to leave, to maintain the boundaries that were already dissolving. Instead, she turned to face him, seeing her own conflicted desire reflected in his eyes. "This is dangerous," she said. "Everything about this arrangement is dangerous." He stepped closer, his hand cupping her face with surprising gentleness. "But I can't pretend anymore that this is just business." When his lips met hers, it was with weeks of suppressed hunger and need. The kiss was everything their fake relationship had promised, and nothing like the careful performance they'd maintained in public. It was raw, desperate, completely real. They barely made it to the couch before clothes began disappearing, replaced by urgent touches and whispered confessions. Julian's hands mapped her body like he was memorizing every curve, every gasp, every tremor. When he looked at her, sprawled beneath him in the moonlight streaming through the windows, she felt beautiful and powerful and completely his. "What are we doing?" She breathed against his neck. "Something we'll probably regret," he replied. But his mouth was already finding hers again. The morning brought harsh sunlight and harsher reality. Sophia woke alone in Julian's bed, wrapped in silk sheets that cost more than her monthly rent. The sound of his voice drifted from the next room, cold and businesslike as he spoke into his phone. "The Martinez woman is perfect for what we need," he was saying. "She's grateful, controllable, and desperate enough to do whatever it takes. The board will be impressed by how authentic she seems." Sophia's blood turned to ice. Through the crack in the door, she could see Julian pacing, fully dressed in his business suit while she lay naked and exposed in his bed. "No. She has no idea this was always about the merger," Julian continued. "Rebecca's father owns the largest construction company on the East Coast. Once I'm back together with Rebecca, the Crossstone merger will be unstoppable. The Martinez situation is just temporary theater." The phone clattered to the floor as Sophia's hand flew to her mouth, stifling a gasp. Everything clicked into place with sickening clarity. The arrangement, the gala, Rebecca's pointed questions, even last night's passion. It had all been orchestrated. It's all been fake. She was nothing more than a prop in Julian's larger game. Sophia dressed in silence, her hands shaking as she gathered her scattered clothes and dignity. The woman who had felt like a queen just hours before now felt like a fool in borrowed finery. She slipped out of Julian's penthouse like a thief, each step echoing her shame in the marble hallway. At home, Victoria's innocent questions about the fancy party felt like salt in fresh wounds. Sophia forced smiles and made breakfast while her world crumbled around her. The money Julian had already paid sat in her account like blood money, enough to cover Victoria's surgery, but not enough to wash away the taste of betrayal. Monday morning arrived gray and unforgiving. Sophia sat at her desk, trying to focus on spreadsheets while Julian moved through the office like nothing had changed. When he finally approached her desk, his expression was carefully neutral. "We need to discuss Saturday's event," he said, his voice professional and distant. "There's nothing to discuss." Sophia didn't look up from her computer. "I understand my role perfectly now." Something flickered across his face, but it was gone before she could identify it. "Sophia, about last night." "Last night was a mistake." She cut him off, her voice sharp enough to draw blood. "One that won't happen again." For the next 2 weeks, they maintained a facade of normalcy that fooled no one. Sophia played her part at social events with mechanical perfection, smiling and laughing and hanging on Julian's arm while her heart slowly turned to stone. He watched her with growing frustration, as if her sudden emotional distance was personally offensive. The breaking point came at Marcus's Webb's birthday party, a lavish affair at his estate in the Hamptons. Julian had been drinking, something Sophia had rarely seen, and his careful control was slipping. "You've been different." He cornered her on the terrace while guests mingled inside. The ocean crashed against the rocks below, providing a soundtrack to their private drama. "I've been exactly what you hired me to be," Sophia replied, staring out at the dark water rather than meeting his eyes. "That's not true, and you know it." His hand caught her wrist, pulling her around to face him. "What happened between us was real, was it?" She finally looked at him, seeing him flinch at the emptiness in her eyes. "Or was it just part of the performance? Another way to make Rebecca jealous so she'd come running back to you?" Julian's face went pale. "How did you—" "I heard you on the phone that morning." The words came out flat and factual. "I know about the merger. I know this was all just theater to get Rebecca back. I know exactly what I am to you." For a moment, something that looked like genuine remorse flickered across his features. "Sophia, it started that way, but it became something else. Last night proved that. Last night proved that you're an even better actor than I." "Thought that's not true." His voice cracked slightly. "I never meant for things to get so complicated." "Complicated?" Sophia laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You mean you never meant to actually feel something for the help?" Julian's grip tightened on her wrist. "You're twisting this." Am I? She yanked free, stepping back until the terrace railing pressed against her spine. Tell me, Julian, when you were inside me, were you thinking about Rebecca? Were you practicing for her when you got her back? The slap came fast and sharp, snapping her head to the side. For a moment, they both stared at each other in shock. Julian's hand still hung in the air between them, trembling slightly. God, he breathed. Sophia, I didn't mean to. Yes, you did. She touched her burning cheek, surprised to find she wasn't crying. You meant every bit of this. The question is, what are you going to do now? Before he could answer, Rebecca's voice cut through the night air like a blade. Well, what do we have here? She stood in the doorway, beautiful and terrible in her designer gown, watching them with undisguised satisfaction. Behind her, other party guests were starting to gather, drawn by the drama unfolding on the terrace. Having relationship problems? Julian? Rebecca's smile was poison sweet. How fortunate that I'm here to help. The audience of party guests watched with ravenous curiosity as Rebecca glided onto the terrace, her emerald dress catching the moonlight like armor. Julian stood frozen between the two women, his carefully constructed world beginning to collapse around him. Rebecca, this isn't what it looks like, Julian started, but Sophia's laugh cut him off. Actually, it's exactly what it looks like, Sophia said, her voice carrying across the terrace with deadly clarity. It's a man who's been using everyone around him as pawns in his pathetic little game. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Someone had their phone out, recording. Julian's reputation, built over decades, was about to crumble in real time. Sophia, stop. Julian's voice was low and desperate. You don't understand what you're doing. I understand perfectly. She turned to face Rebecca and the watching crowd. Ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you about the great Julian Cross and his master plan to win back his ex-girlfriend. Sophia, please. Julian reached for her, but she stepped away, her eyes never leaving the crowd. He hired me, his secretary, to play his girlfriend. Paid me to dress up and smile pretty and make Rebecca here jealous enough to come running back. The whole thing was just an elaborate con to secure a business merger. Rebecca's perfect composure cracked slightly. Julian, is this true? But Julian wasn't looking at Rebecca. He was staring at Sophia with an expression of such raw pain that, for a moment, her resolve wavered. Tell them, Sophia demanded. Tell them how you used me. How you made me believe it was real when it was all just another business transaction. Julian's silence was answer enough. The crowd's murmurs grew louder, phones capturing every moment of his humiliation. You want to know the really pathetic part? Sophia continued, her voice breaking slightly. For a moment, I actually believed you cared about me. I thought what happened between us meant something. It did mean something. Julian's voice was barely audible. Then why didn't you fight for it? The question hung in the air like an accusation. Why are you still standing there looking at her like she's the prize you've been working toward all along? Julian's gaze shifted between Sophia and Rebecca, and in that moment of hesitation, Sophia saw everything she needed to know. Even now, even after everything, he couldn't choose her over his precious merger. That's what I thought, she whispered. The crowd parted as Sophia walked away from the terrace, her head held high despite the tears finally spilling down her cheeks. Behind her, she heard Rebecca's voice, soft and triumphant. Oh, Julian, what have you done? 3 months later, Sophia sat in a hospital waiting room as Victoria recovered from her successful surgery. The money Julian had paid her had covered every expense, with enough left over to start their new life in California. Far from the wreckage of her time in his world, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. The merger fell through. Rebecca found someone richer. I know you'll never forgive me, but I need you to know that what we had was the most real thing in my life. I was just too much of a coward to fight for it. I hope you and Victoria are happy. You deserve everything beautiful this world has to offer. Sophia stared at the message for a long time, then deleted it without responding. Some bridges, once burned, could never be rebuilt. Victoria emerged from her room with a bright smile, declaring herself ready for their new adventure. As they walked out of the hospital together, Sophia felt something she hadn't experienced in months: genuine hope. Julian Cross had given her more than money. He had shown her that she was capable of being someone extraordinary, even if he hadn't been brave enough to love that person. The California sun felt warm on her face as she helped Victoria into their car. In the rearview mirror, she caught a glimpse of the woman she had become: stronger, wiser, and finally free. Some stories don't end with love conquering all. Sometimes they end with something more valuable: the knowledge that you are worth fighting for, even if the person you loved wasn't brave enough to do the fighting. The end.